So I've got my coat laid out on my nailing table, and it looks kind of big from here, but actually it's not very big at all. So what we're going to do is I mark the center back of the coat with the X. You can see them. The X's go all the way up. And then I marked a straight line on my nailing table. And then what I did, get this out of the way. And then what I did is I put a raised staple every, like 6 or 7 inches down this line. So I keep the center back on that line when I nail. I can feel that staple right through the leather of my coat, so I know it's straight. So we're going to nail on this line. And then what I did was I marked over another line. There was something else here I nailed before. It was a jacket. I marked over another line on this edge with my straight edge. So I came over to, first one is 27 from the center, 28 from the center, 29 and 30. I marked that far on each side of the table. So I don't think I'm going to get this wider than like 29 in width. And if I get 29, I'll be happy, because the coat laid out just by itself measures, I don't think it's quite 28 on the half. Yeah, it's 28. It's 28 on the half. So the top is going to be, that's the narrowest part. So we're going to try to get the top out first. I wanted to say one thing. I did let the hem down on this coat, and it had silk binding tape that does not stretch on the bottom edge, so I cut that off. Now this edge has binding tape, but it's cut on the bias, so I'm going to keep that on. The other thing I wanted to point out is that if you had a coat that had been worn for a long time, you're going to have a wear edge in the hem. So this coat had no wear edge. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. So, but if it did, you'd either have to trim this out, the edge, where it was worn before you nail it, or you're going to see it after you nail it, and then you're going to wonder why you didn't fix it. So just caution on that part. We're going to wet this. I decided I'm going to use leather softener and water. It's a 50, I don't know, it comes pre-mixed. I buy it at Samuel Bauer. It's called Leather Ease. And it's a concentrate. You mix it a cup to a gallon of water. And then I'm going to put this on, let it sit. This is what it looks like. I'm going to put this on, wet the whole surface, and then I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to work my way to the bottom, and I'll let you see what it looks like once after I get it all wet. Because it's going to have to sit probably about 10 minutes after I wet the leather side of the fur before I nail it out. But, this has got pretty good stretch to it, so I think it should work out fine. When I wet the leather side, what I'm using is, it's a natural bristle brush, and I just dip it in my water solution with that Easy Leather and brush it in. Now, what I've done is I did that side, I did the top, and then after I've got it good and saturated, what I'm going to do is fold it over to keep the wet on the inside and let it sit for about 15 minutes and see how it feels. And then we're going to start stretching. What I like to do when I'm waiting for this, while it softens up a little bit and that water saturates in, is I like to kind of like massage the leather through the fur a little bit. And then also I like to coax it. So I'm going to hold the center back up here at the top and hold the two fronts, and I'm going to kind of like hand stretch it, pull it softly each way, because the top is what's the shortest in width. So I want the top to stretch, you know, more. And hopefully that'll coax that, because this was stretched, you know, quite a bit when it was originally made. So there's not a lot of stretch left in the top of this coat. So we'll see what we can get, but hopefully we can get some width. When I'm nailing, I keep the wet area, I keep this folded back on itself until I get to that area I'm stretching. And I'm not going to get this as wide as I thought I was. There's just not enough stretch in the fur. So we're just going to get it blocked out as best as we can. And we'll see what happens. What's smart to do when you nail is put your staple in a leather if there's leathers in the coat, because that's going to be the strongest part. Don't put it in the fur, put it in the leather strip. This did not have a lot of stretch, so it's where I barely got it out to the 27 mark. I might have to fill in a little bit right here on each side, as you can see that, or just trim it the best I can. But it's nailed out. And I think what I probably should have used on this was the 50-50 mix of denatured alcohol with water. And it's just safer. This just didn't seem like it should have, I don't know. To me, it just, once you work on something, you get a feel for it. And I think I should have used that on this. Not that it's going to make any difference now, but I think I should have. So we'll let this dry overnight, and then we'll square it, and we'll see how it looks. I still have the sleeves that I could use for maybe a border on one edge, but there's not a lot of sleeve. So we'll see what happens. I let this dry overnight, and then I took out and removed all the staplers. I use this. It's so easy. I bought it at an office supply place. Staple puller. It's got a little magnet in here. It keeps the staples from flying all over. And it just feels good in your hand. So this is a nice staple remover. Anyway, I took all the staples out. I squared it with my square and my long ruler, marked the edge all the way around, and then I put cold tape on that edge that I'm going to trim it right here, and I put the cold tape on the edge. Cold tape is a fabric tape that has an adhesive backing that you just unpeel it, you know, off the roll and stick it on as you go, and it works great. It does two things. It gives you a good edge to cut on, and it gives you a good edge to sew on, because the tape doesn't stretch, and it'll keep your goods nice and, you know, controlled as you put it and you sew it through a sewing machine or through your fur machine. So we're going to square this out, and then I am going to probably put some weft backing on the back of it. Now, remember when I had told you that I had kind of like a visual line here, and where I thought I'd, you know, be close to as far as laying it out and trimming it? So this is the difference. So here was the front neckline where the collar attached, and lapel collar. So there's not a lot that we're not using on this coat is what I'm trying to show you. So the back neckline, you know, to have built that up at all, it would have really been a waste of time. You wouldn't have gained more than like and where would you get the fur to do it? You're not going to, you know, find it anywhere. The sleeve would have just looked, to take it from the sleeve would have really looked odd. So I'm happy with how it turned out, and we're going to trim this off and then put the weft cloth on. But before I do that, I'm going to wet glaze it, and I'll show you how to do that. So what is wet glazing, and what does it do? Wet glazing is a process of taking water, you mist it on, you just want a light mist on the surface of your fur. That's about all it takes. And then you take your wire brush and you brush the hair all going down in one direction. And it's kind of like a dry, well, it's kind of like you're setting the hairs so that when they dry, they're all going to dry going in the same direction, and it won't have like the little colics that you see right now from when we nailed it, because we adjusted this back and forth when we were moving it on the board to nail it. So this will dry. You can see I've done this section right here, and I'm going to do this section I'm doing next, and this will dry probably about 15-20 minutes, and then we can work on it further. But you want it nice and dry before you go and disturb it. So get your water, mist it on, brush it in really good, and it also gets rid of a lot of loose hair. So it's a good process to do. Okay, this is dried, and I just want to show you, you know, I think those sections up in the armhole area that I put in, you know, they look pretty good from a distance and even up close. So overall, I think that this will look nice on the back of a couch or the bottom of a bed, whatever she decides to use for it. So I'm going to put the weft lining interfacing stuff on next, and then we'll continue from there. Well, I'm continuing on with this mink blanket. So what happened was the fabrics I wanted for the backing, because of the California fire, were not available. So I had to go with a fabric I kind of like. It's a crushed velvet, and I think it looks good with the mink. It's a little red, but depending on which cast you see, it kind of shifts color. So what I did was, because it wasn't quilted, I put a thin layer of batting in between onto it. I pinned it on to that fabric, and then I went around the whole edge and sewed it together around the perimeter. And then what I did was I pressed that one edge back on the top, and I sewed the top edge first with all three thicknesses, the mink, the batting, and the velvet, all together in one seam edge. You can understand that. And then after I got that top sewed across, then I had to also press this far edge, and I sewed the far edge from the top corner down. And now what I did was I laid this out so it's nice and flat, and it's not real big, but it's pretty. And I laid it out nice and flat. This looks a little rumpled here because I've got a pin in it, but it does lay flat. And what I'm going to do is turn this bottom edge up, mark it on the fold, then I'll press it. Same with this side. I've got this side already done. And then I'm going to stitch it down. I'm going to leave an opening probably about 10 or 12 inches here along the bottom. I'll put a little seam binding on that so I can turn the whole thing in and out like a pillowcase through that opening at the bottom. So the next step is to mark this. I've got this side marked. I'm going to press it, and then I'll do the same thing on this very bottom, and then we'll see what it looks like after we get it all sewed up. I sewed my seam binding on the end portion here about, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches. And then what I did was I marked this when I had it folded after I pressed it. And so I marked it on the fur and on the fabric. And each one of those spots, I've got it pinned. So I need to meet that when I'm sewing, because that will make sure that this stays nice and true. So I'm gonna sew this around, and basically you're just making sure your hair is down, and kind of hard to do one-handed, but you get the idea. I've got the fabric folded, and inside the fabric, oops, I just broke my needle. I can feel that batting. So I've got a nice firm edge there when I'm sewing. So it should look good. I have the backing all sewn around the entire blanket. And then when I get done, what I do is, before I completely turn it, is I go around and trim that back so it's not too much. Miter my corners. But if you're unsure, turn it, then come back, turn it, check it, then come back and trim, because you just don't want to have to like patch something because you're short. So we're going to turn this, and then we're going to I'll show you what we're going to do next. I want to show you how nice this lays. It's got the backing all sewn around the edges, and it's pretty. So I still have to close this bottom up. So I'm just going to turn that and close that by hand, finish that back. And then around the perimeter of the edge, what I do is I just go and I'm going to tack this by hand all the way around the outside edge. Now, I didn't use weft interfacing on this blanket because the mink in this blanket was really strong. It didn't need it. And the stabilizing, this fabric that I used was pretty substantial. It didn't give. It had a nice backing on the back side of the fabric. It was kind of, you know, it's kind of thicker. And then I did put that batting in there, so it should be good. Now what I'm going to do is probably come back and maybe about once, twice, maybe 3 times across the top and 3 times in the middle. I'm going to tack it. I'm going to go through and just make a couple of tacks all the way through the fabric into and catch the leather. I'm going to do it on a leather. So when I'm talking about a leather, this is in between each one of the mink skins, this leather. And it's very sturdy, so you can see how that definition is. So on a leather, I'm going to come back and I'll go from the fabric side, and I'm going to catch that leather in a couple of spots throughout the blanket. And I did leave my batting pinned to my fabric while I was working, so that's still on there, so it hasn't shifted, and I'll leave that on there till it's completely done, and then I'll show it to you when it's finished.